Alright, I've created a new particle here, and it has a collider on it so the player can't get through this doorway. The whole point will be that the player has to open this chest first in order to proceed. The chest will have weapons in it. So I'm going to create a animator controller here, and we're going to call this chest lid. We're going to attach this to the lid, and if we bring up our animator, it will be empty. And what we need to do is create an animation for that. So with the lid selected, has the animator attached to it, create a new animation. We're going to call this chest lid open. We'll save it with the animators, that's fine. And it's a 60 frames per second, so let's go up to 30 seconds, and we're going to rotate this up to where we want it to be opened. So maybe about right there. That looks about right to me. And then if we go back, we can see that the keyframes, we can press play here and see it open. There you go. And then we're going to create a second one called chest lid closed. So in our animation again here, select this, the name of the animation, say create new clip, chest lid close. Same thing, we're going to go forward to 30 frames, and actually what we should probably do is go back to our open frame. That keyframe, that last keyframe, you can use these to go from keyframe to keyframe to make sure you're on the right frame. Copy the component for the transform, go back to the lid close. We want to start the transform open. Paste component values, that way it starts at the right position. And we'll do the same thing for the close. We go to the front. We go to the first one. Copy the component. Lid close. Go up to 30 frames and paste component values. There we go. So now we have the lid closing as well, if we need to use that. Now back in our animator, we have the two animations here. We don't want to have either of these be the default, so we're going to create an empty state and set this empty state as the default state. And then we're going to have two triggers. Chest open and chest close, and we'll just set those. So go ahead and select the animations as well, make sure they're not going to loop. We don't want them to loop, otherwise the lid will just open and open and open and open and open. So there you go. Alright, so now we've got this chest here. When we get close to it, this spacebar button in the bottom right, or bottom left rather, turns on. And then if we press spacebar, pay attention up here, we've got this thing, the chest opens and this disappears, and now the player can walk through it. So let me show you how we're doing this. Attached to the chest, we have a few new new scripts. One is this trigger open script, and all this does is calls a broadcast message to call the open function on all the scripts attached to this object. The other two scripts, on open destroy object and on open end emission, are two very simple scripts. The destroy object takes a target object in a delay and will destroy that target object in that delay time. I also added this little if target object so that if you forget to attach it, you won't get an error, you'll just get this little console message saying you forgot something. Same with end emission. We basically take a target object, a particle system, and a delay, and we wait for the delay, and then after that we disable the emission. This emission module thing is a new thing for 5.3 I've discovered as of today, from what I understand. So that's how we enable and disable emissions now. And then the way we call this is in our animation. I added a flag, or an animation flag, an event flag rather, event trigger, event flag, an event at the end of the chest open lid. You can't. For this type of animation, it has to be a function that's available on any of the scripts, and if it's like open is a script, a function on multiple scripts, so we can't call that here. So that's why I had to use this call open function from trigger open. So we call open on trigger open, that broadcasts the message to the rest, so that when we end up after triggering this open, it runs this animation at the end. It triggers all these on that script. Now we are able to open that because the player character now has the secondary capsule collider that's a trigger attached to it, and then a new script called player interaction. Player interaction it's a very simplified script, and if you're gonna do a more complicated game, you're gonna have to adjust this. But at its basic, we have this on trigger enter, and if it's an interactable object, which the lid is set to interactable in its tag, then we will set that to be the current object that we have available, and we'll set the UI button for the spacebar to be interactable as well, and that will turn it from disabled to not disabled. If you haven't checked that out, it's just in the button component right here. If it's interactable, it'll be bright. If it's not interactable, it'll be dim. One thing on that, side note, I do have this fade text interactable script that if the parent button that you've assigned is interactable, then the text color will be color on, otherwise it will be color off. This is because by default, when the button is interactable, the text below it looks like this, and I want the text to look more like this. I want the text to look more like that, so that's also faded with the button. So that's a small script there as well. So back to our human player interaction thing. So that allows us to call that button, and then the button calls, as well as spacebar, when we have a current object interact with object. Now again, this only assumes that every object you interact with is going to have an animator with the trigger open. For our purposes, that's exactly what's going to happen. The chests and the door levers are all going to have a trigger, an animation trigger called open to run their animations. If you're going to have more interaction with different types of objects, you'll need to expand on this to set up cases where this is where you don't want to call a animation event or animation trigger called open. So that's pretty much all we're doing here. I do want to add a couple more things. I want to ensure that once the lid is open, it's no longer interactable, so that the spacebar button will disappear and whatnot. And I also want to equip a weapon when the player opens the chests. And we've got an animation for that, and we also have a new camera that I'm going to add that's more of a close-up camera, so we get a cool shot of the weapon being equipped.